Intramuros was the biggest European city in Asia. It defines our culture. The problem is most of our officials do not appreciate it.
It's important because it's part of our history, part of our heritage, and one of the few physical evidences remaining of the Spanish period of Philippine history.
There are many good stories about Filipinos, people who headed the construction of the walls. The carvers were Filipinos also. It was a very exciting time. That's what I remember most, having a restoration force as big as Intramuros was at the time. Well, didn't exist anywhere in the country. When we came into Intramuros to work, what are we restoring? We do not know. How did it look, except for the ruined walls? That's why we have to dig pictures and pictures and pictures just to be able to provide a background.
And in the early days, it was really a dead town. Even when Casa Manila was finished, we would make whatever pakulo just to bring in people.
The greatest satisfaction I had was the presence of a good team because basically the three of us were the ones who set the initial directions of the Intramuros administration.
Since last year, I'm really amazed at how Intramuros has grown and has attracted so many people considering the problems we had in the beginning. They have thousands of people coming here and all of them are paying entrance fees, restaurants, all those chalets. So can you imagine? It's alive.
You have many people saying that Intramuros should not be preserved because it is a colonial memory and that should be erased. I don't think so. So it's about time that our people should see Intramuros is not just a symbol of colonialization, but a symbol of our spirit to rise above that.
Intramuros for me is a place that tells you the story of Manila, the city that I was born in, the city that I worked in, and the city that I live in and will probably live in for the next years. My life with Intramuros began in 1999 when I started volunteering for a museum, Bahay Chinoy. And it was from there that I started doing cultural work, and eventually which led to us establishing our tour outfit in 2005. Intramuros is a place of a lot of personal memories for me because I've been coming here since I was a little boy. I remember my first trip here was in the 1980s when we had a school trip at San Agustin Museum. And I distinctly remember getting freaked out because I went to a crypt with lots of dead people, and which nobody really explained what they were. So that fascination with Manila's history, with my personal family's history, began here in Intramuros. I think what we do here in Intramuros introduces people to our city. And by introducing Intramuros to our visitors, we tell them the story and we make them understand the city, my city, Manila, what it was, how it is today, and what it will be in the future. My hopes for Intramuros is to be a place that is anchored in its past, but at the same time, it's a place that can have new ideas for the future. No? A place that will inspire people, a place that will create good memories, and a place that will make you feel good about being a Manileño. I'm Ivan Mandy. I'm a cultural guide from Old Manila Walks, and we have been doing historical walks around the old city since 2005. I see myself as a cultural worker and a storyteller, and I tell basically the story of our city. And the story of Manila begins here in Intramuros.
Every great and important city has an old town. Intramuros to me is Manila's old town. I have always been awed by Intramuros. It seems like when I'm coming here, there is an excitement that you feel that what happened in this place. There is something so sacred, so noble, so precious about Intramuros. I named it after my grandmother, Barbara, to just give it a Spanish flavor. And for some years, after a few years, we decided to really gear towards heritage so that people will see and know what is heritage, what is sinauna, yung kinaugalian natin, yung traditions natin, which will be seen in our cuisine and in our performances, in the dance that we present here in Barbara's. I would attribute it to my mom, to my mother, who taught me the value of work, the value of excellence, the value of feeding people in style and giving them satisfaction. I would want to happen that Intramuros will be remembered by every person who comes to this place because of its uniqueness, its sacredness, its history, its everything. There is so much here. I'm Barbara Gordon de los Reyes of Barbara's Heritage Restaurant. I have been in Intramuros for the past 30 years, which has been a great part of my work, my joys. It's like an adventure.
I'm Martin Tino Jr. My lolo became chairman of the COMELEC, and he was the one who transferred the COMELEC to Intramuros. I was in grade school. He would go home at 6 o'clock every afternoon. They pick us up at 4 o'clock, so I have to wait for him in his office. So I would go around Intramuros in the early 50s. It was all ruins. I've always been interested in old houses. I began traveling throughout the whole country. Intramuros was the biggest European city in Asia. This is our history. It defines our culture. The problem is most of our officials do not appreciate it. IA was founded. And Jimmy Laya, I didn't know Jimmy Laya. He got me as a consultant. Then we started having exhibits. The first ever on relieves, on santos, on ivory. We have all these horrible looking modern buildings. I wish they could tear it down and rebuild it properly. And in the early days, it was really a dead town. Even when Casa Manila was finished, we would make whatever pakulo just to bring in people. In the afternoon, Intramuros was empty. Empty. There was hardly any people. Since last year, I'm really amazed at how Intramuros has grown and has attracted so many people, considering the problems we had in the beginning. They have thousands of people coming here, and all of them are paying entrance fees, restaurants, all those calesa. Can you imagine? It's alive. You can see the whole thing is alive.
As I always say before, whenever we say Manila, Manila was of course Intramuros, and during the Spanish period, and it was their prime city, and so everything that was about Philippine history and culture during the Spanish and of course the American period began and eventually developed in the walled city. And in the course of time, no, this would become also a prime urban tourism area, especially with the restoration and the heritage conservation that has been going on in the city. I think the biggest challenge for Intramuros is for it to be incorporated into that modernization without affecting the historical heritage of the walled city. I mean, accommodations can be done for the modernization that is happening. Internet, telephones, modern facilities for tourists, but it doesn't have to come at the sacrifice of what existed there before. I think that's one of the biggest challenge until today, for developing Intramuros. I'm Dr. Jose Victor Torres. I'm a associate professor here at the History Department of the De La Salle University. I teach Rizal and Philippine history here in the history department. Well, I think it's because it's one of the closest place. If you're a foreign visitor, it's one of the closest place and one of the most visited based on tourism information. It's one of the most visited places in Manila. Because you have to remember, Manila is the capital city. And a capital city has to have its attraction, both old and new. And for so many years, that old attraction, I don't mean old because it's passé, it's old because it's part of our past. And the realization that there was something that remained behind for the people to know and experience and see with their own eyes is probably something that's an experience, a good experience for visitors, both foreign and local. I'd probably siguro describe Intramuros as rich. It's rich in heritage, it's rich in the Filipino identity, and it's very rich in our history and culture. And I think that would fit the description not only before but today. And as I always said, whenever you walk through the streets of Intramuros, you are walking through Philippine history.
Welcome everybody to the Intramuros Administration's 22nd episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions. Our session for today is about geographical indications on agriculture produce in the Philippines. Now, before we start, I'd like to read out some house rules first. So if you would like to ask questions, feel free to do so. If you are viewing via Zoom, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and you can raise your questions there. If you are viewing via Facebook, you may send in your questions in the comment section. Please note that we will do our best to accommodate all of the questions. Only those who have successfully registered and viewed in Zoom will be eligible to get a certificate. A feedback form will be emailed to you after the session and a certificate will be sent within a week. If you are unable to attend the webinar, please let us know now so we can give a slot to another registrant. Ensure that your audio is okay, wear your reliable set of headphones, don't be shy to ask questions, and most importantly, get yourself comfortable and enjoy. Now, I'd like to call on the administrator of Intramuros, Attorney Guillermo, who will introduce for us today our speakers. Attorney?
Good day, everyone. We welcome you to the 22nd episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions. This is the second session that we're having regarding geographical indications, trademarking heritage. Geographical indications is quite a new field in terms of intellectual properties. Some may consider it as a right, some may consider it also as a legal regime. But more than that, there is value in the discussion and the conversation on why we need to protect our heritage. So for today, we'll have three distinguished speakers who will be discussing us this matter again. First, we'll have Estela Duque, who will be moderating as well the forum on the presentation tonight. Estela is a chocolate connoisseur, so she's an architect, historian, and social entrepreneur as well. Then we also have an agriculture engineer. Patrick Belisario will also be joining us. He's a registered professional agricultural engineer. So there's a sense of heaviness in there, but we will try. Patrick will be explaining to us as well the value of geographical indications. And finally, we have an eminent professor from the Ateneo de Manila University, Professor Fernando Zialcita, who will be sharing to us as well his thoughts regarding geographical indications. So while it may be stormy outside in Manila, but we hope that you will join us for a fruitful discussion on the subject later. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator. Now I'd like to turn over the screen to our guest host for today. So Mrs. Estela Duque.
Thank you, John. So let me just try to share my screen. Right. There. And let's watch it from there. So, good morning. Good morning to everyone here in Europe and in the Philippines. Good evening. My name is Estela, and I would like, before we go to the actual presentation, I would like to thank everybody who are here today joining us. I would like to thank Intramuros administration in particular. And in terms of the sequence, I would like to step back and just say a few things about last week's presentation, because it's very important to see the context. I would like to point out that in an hour, we can only deal with a few things. And we have three speakers. And so the intention is to show you the gaps. In the first presentation, Piña was an important gap for which there was no information available. And I felt that in order to move forward I needed to show what kind of things could be done for it. And that's all that we were able to do over there. And so I'm showing this slide again. And if anybody wants to contact us for help or for information, please do so. The email addresses will be shown later on. And I would also like to show the credits, which were forgotten last time. I would like to acknowledge the help, especially of Dr. Zialcita, Feliz Santa Maria, and Ms. Adelaide Lim, who had been advising me in this presentation, and of course, our GI expert, Peter Damery. And then we had Cherise as well, and you can contact her in these addresses. And we featured Tinalactao Cebu, and I would like to thank the weavers, the women of the Lake Cebu, and of course, the information given to us by the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. Now, I would like to also have a few discussion of the parameters. This is a transnational exchange. We are talking to you in the Philippines, but everybody else, maybe there will be diaspora overseas, and I am in Europe. And so the time slots were changed primarily so that this would be possible. I talked about the limited scope of the presentation and the gaps, and I would also like to acknowledge the Filipino audience. And these are not just the Filipinos in the Philippines, and more importantly for this one, I would like to acknowledge the Filipino diaspora, which includes myself. And this is because this has to be an exchange between the people who are living at home and the people who send back to the Philippines through the diaspora. And we also have the supporters of the Philippines who are non-Filipinos who are watching with us today. So moving on to the actual presentation for today on agriculture produce, this marks a very different area because the cultural goods and agricultural goods have very different approaches to them. Earlier, we discussed the actual definition, and Patrick will go into that into details. What I want to show today that is quite different is the fact that the Philippines is situated between two opposing tensions. On one hand, we have trade between the Philippines and other manufacturing countries. And in particular, we get aid from different places. And on one hand, we get aid from US, and then on the other hand, we get the aid from European Union. And at the world trade level, there are two tensions from these two different sources. So what I'm showing to you is the kind of economic sources that we have and the kind of pressure we have, whether to follow either a geographic indications or collective marks. So as you know, the European Union follows the GI, and the United States prefers the private trademarking system. What we have in the Philippines are collective marks. We don't have any GIs. And here I show you the kind of logos that we have for the established ones. Now, in terms of the definition of terms, I just wanted to show you that we have to approach this not just as a practice and in terms of what we experience on the field. We have to look at this from the point of view of the theory of it, because these are intellectual properties which can be approached as a discourse. So webinar 1 looked at craft and artisanship, and webinar 2 looks at intellectual property in agricultural goods. There's a slight difference, but there are also parallels. In terms of modernity, we are looking at the same things. We are looking at the environment. We are looking at technology, trade, and more importantly, the tension between tradition and innovation. Now, for those of you who are interested, and I'm sure there will be in the different sections of the audience, we will have people who are interested in the theory. In cultural goods, we looked at the practice of theory through Pierre Bourdieu. But now, because of agriculture, an interesting thing that I've learned recently after listening to Ateneo is I got reminded about post-colonial discourse. And as I told you earlier, there are different tensions that we have to deal with as part of the global South. And that is that the fact that we are a former colony. And so the impact of imperialism is still felt today. And the cultural critique of Marx is very useful. Why? Because of the theory of the worker exploitation. This is something that we can discuss later on in the future. But for now, this is something that I would just like to signpost. And from 2000 onwards, the discourse comes from material culture. Right. And so in terms of themes and the theory, what are the goals? What we need to understand is the power relations we are embedded in everyday life so that we can have reflexive action. And in terms of the themes, we have to deal with globalization, capitalism, and gender studies. And this is why I pointed out that we have a varied audience and we are all situated in very different locations. So in terms of topics, we have to deal with international trade, technology, and transnationalism. Now, this is a very important slide. Thank you to Peter Damry for it. And this just shows you where we are in ASEAN. So we have a list of the countries which have the GI system. We have Thailand leading the way. We have Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia after that, and also Cambodia and Laos. And of course, Myanmar, which is introducing one. If you want to get more information about this, we could email Peter Damry for that. And the Philippines, which has none. We have the collective mark. So I'll skip through this. This is just to show you the complexity of the system. We are talking about a system that has to have a national framework because we have to start dealing with supranational bodies. And I want to just zoom in this. This is what we see in the Philippines. So we have the producers, the processors, the distributors, and the consumers. But with GI, it cannot stop at that because we have on the other side the international regulators. And so to go back to this quickly, this is what we need to understand as a community in the Philippines. And this is why we cannot get around engaging with government and non-government agencies. Very quickly, from the International Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, we found out that in 2020, these are the list of agricultural goods that we are dealing with. So we have pili nuts from Bicol. We have Kalinga coffee. And notice that the year is blank because this information is not available. We have Camiguin lanzones. Cordillera rice from different locations. So we have Mountain Province, Kalinga, Ifugao, and Benguet. And of course, the last one, we already have the Davao Pomelo, which has its collective mark. And cacao, which we'll deal with in a separate presentation in September. Now, Patrick?
Okay, good evening and good morning to those in the other half of the globe. I'd like to share with you the experiences we had in developing geographical indications, particularly on Davao Pomelo, which we started in 2013. Then also, I'd like to share with you the experiences we had with Guinmaras Mango. On these two commodities or products, we worked closely with the Davao Pomelo Council way back then in 2013. Then sometime 2014 also, we started with the Guinmaras Mango Producers Development Cooperative. Next. So the outline, I'd like to run through with you I'd like to start with the status of our Philippine GIs. Then I'll show you also the list of GI products or sites that has potential. So basically, the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines pre-identified these pilots or these potential GI commodities. Then I'd like to share also with you the support that we got from the European Union on TRTA3 or Trade-Related Technical Assistance in 2014 until 2016, then extended to 2017. Then finally, I'll show you the process that these two groups have undergone towards developing the geographical indication. Then I'll conclude my presentation afterwards. Next. So as mentioned already, we have the draft rules and regulations on geographical indications, but we don't have the GI registration system. We only have the collective mark registration system. Basically, the Republic Act number 8293 or the IP code provides that geographical indication is an IP right. It's an intellectual property right. Then in the same IP code of section 9 of the IP code states that among the functions of the Bureau of Trademarks is the search and examination of the applications for registration of geographic indications and the issuance of the certificates of registration. So we have these draft rules and regulations, which is an extension of the existing IP code. Then by definition, in the same document, GI or geographical indication refers to indications which identify a good as originating in a territory, region, or locality where a given quality, reputation, or other characteristics of the good is essentially attributable to its geographical origin and or human factors. Please take note on the word reputation. Next. To contrast, I saw this briefer for Europeans to invest in Philippines. It says that if you are to invest, it advises the Europeans that on geographical indications in the Philippines, it is in compliance with the TRIPS agreement or the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Agreement. The Philippines included GIs in the enumeration of recognized forms of IP rights under the IP code. However, it says the remaining provisions of the IP code do not make further express reference to GIs. The IP code does not even define GIs. While the IP code does not provide a legal framework specific to the registration and enforcement of rights relating to or arising from a GI, it does extend some protection to GIs, allowing them to be registered as a collective mark. Then if we define, next please. If we define collective mark, it is a visible sign designated as such in the application for registration and capable of distinguishing the origin or any other common characteristics, including the quality of goods or services of different enterprises, which use the sign under the control of the registered owner of the collective mark. So in other words, it's only mentioning the origin, then some common characteristics, but it doesn't refer to the word in the geographical indication, which is important, is the reputation. But it has the same definition of quality also. Then, okay, next. So if you look at the journey of our geographical indications, yes, 7 years ago, our Philippine government identified around 11 potential GIs. Then in the same manner, when I look at the new list from IPOPHIL, they have these 10 lists. If we rearrange the list, can we go next? If we rearrange the list, I did a categorization, like basically we can categorize the two groups of lists or pre-identified GI products. One is agriculture and food, and the other one is agriculture and fiber. Both are grown, are basically agriculture. And if you look at the 2013 list, it has 8 agriculture and food products. Starting, I just rearranged from the northern Luzon to southern Luzon. So you have Kalinga Coffee and the Gupan Bongos in northern Luzon. Then Bicol Pili in southern Luzon, Tayabas Lambanog, Batangas Barako. So those are in the southern Luzon. Then Western Visayas, you have Guinmaras Mango. Then you have Cebu processed mango in central Visayas. Then in southern Mindanao, it's Davao Pomelo. And in the 2013 list also, for agriculture and fiber, 3 were identified. Lumban Barong, then Aklan Piña. So that's Lumban Barong is in Luzon. Then Aklan Piña in the Visayas. Then Lake Cebu Tinalac. The red, highlighted in red, these are the GIs, the potential GIs that we have worked in the past few years. Like we work for, I think, 2 to 3 years at least. Then we piloted Guinmaras Mango, so that's number 6. Then prior to Guinmaras Mango, we worked voluntarily with Davao Pomelo. So before the European funding, we already finished the registration of Davao Pomelo, but the preparation is basically towards getting this GI or aligning these systems with the GI. Then in January 2020, we have agriculture and food, Bicol Pili, Davao Pomelo. So that should be tick out already. Then you have Cordillera Heirloom Rice, Camiguin Lanzones, Davao Cacao, Kalinga Coffee. Then on agriculture and fiber, which I think we have a rich heritage also, we have Bagtason Loom in Antique, Sabutan Weave in Aurora, then Basay Banig in Samar, then Yakan Cloth of Basilan and Zamboanga. So if I look at this list, then potentially IPOPHIL would like to work on the new lists. Next. Just to share the specific results of the work we did in the past. Prior to the EU TRTA project, the first group is the Davao Pomelo, Lake Cebu Tinalac, Bicol Pili, Kalinga Coffee, Guinmaras Mango. So IPOPHIL initiated the development of these GIs. Then with the support from the European government, European Commission, we were able to assist the Guinmaras Mango and Lake Cebu Tinalac. Then last week, the presentation on fiber, Lake Cebu Tinalac, was already done by Peter Damary. So I took charge of the Guinmaras Mango, then Lake Cebu Tinalac was taken care of by Peter. This is also the division we had when we work on the 2 pilots. So we have 1 pilot for the food, then we have 1 pilot for the fiber. Next. So the process is basically sequential. Like we always start with gathering the stakeholders. Then we look at organization. Like we do assessment, we do planning, strategic planning. Then from there, we situate how to approach the development of code of practice. But in most cases, like in the 2 commodities that I will be highlighting, for Davao Pomelo and Guinmaras Mango, when we came in, there's already a draft code of practice. So the question now is if we are to bring this to the different stakeholders, how would the stakeholders view this? Then later on, a bigger question on who would own the code of practice and who will implement the code of practice. Then talking about implementation, we continue with the development of quality management by emphasizing internal control, or we call it internal audit. Then we relate this to the market. So the quality management as a tool is really a tool for marketing and at the same time implementation of the code of practice. Then last but not the least, which is the most important, we do business or economic modeling. Like if the organization who will embrace this would sustain, not just by enforcing it, but also to be rewarded at the market. So somehow the business modeling is offered to the group, or economic modeling in case if it's a non-profit organization, is offered to the group for them to see how to sustain this implementation of the code of practice. Next. So first case, Davao Pomelo. When we came in 2013, since coincidentally, Peter and myself separately moved to Davao. So him from Europe just moved to Davao sometime July. Then myself also with my family, we moved to Davao in sometime May 2013. Then with this, or prior to that movement or transfer in Davao, I attended the training where Peter was one of the experts. So we attended the training on GI in France in 2012. Then a year later, it was a surprise that we'll be working together in Davao. So with the opportunity, we said as long as the producers groups are willing to work with us, then we can make a case of developing the GI for Davao Pomelo. So if you look at the logos now, the first logo, there's this strong emphasis on geographical indication. And when we registered this with the IPOPHIL, they said, first is we did a revision of the logo. Then together with the stakeholders, then with the draft rules and regulations on registration, we ended up registering the Davao Pomelo as a collective mark. Okay, next. So the process on stakeholders consultation, of course, the stakeholders were excited on this. Then the first question on stakeholders consultation is, who should be the center of the universe? So in that workshop, we were able to facilitate the differentiation. Who will be the center of the Davao Pomelo? So in that case, the group said it should be the seedling producers, the nursery operators, the growers themselves, the groups, cooperatives, or companies, then integrated operators, including assemblers, wholesalers, and retailers. Then the support groups or the secondary stakeholders are basically the government offices. So we have the local government from the City Agriculture Office. Then you have the regional offices of the Department of Agriculture, Department of Trade, Department of Science and Technology, then the private sector, the Chamber of Commerce. At that time, we were also differentiating because the Davao Chamber of Commerce has a branding program. So they also have a trademark on the Davao made products. So we said we should bring the development of the code of practice to the primary stakeholders, then expect support from the secondary stakeholders. Next. So with that, our next approach is look at the organization. So when we came in with Davao Pomelo, there's already a council. So the council is both supported by the Department of Agriculture and Department of Trade, also the city government. But we found out in that council, there are only 3 members. So these are actually the famous brands. And we showed to them the stakeholders mapping, and they agreed that it shouldn't be us only. We should bring in, because there's a big responsibility of maintaining the quality of Davao Pomelo. So from 3 membership group, we were able to expand to almost 20. Then from there, the group decided to come up with the Davao Pomelo Industry Association, and applied for a registration with the Securities and Exchange Commission as a non-stock corporation. The final name of the group registered is Davao Pomelo Stakeholders Association Incorporated. That was in February 2014. Then basically, we narrowed down the mandate. Number 1 is to protect the Pomelo GI, the Davao Pomelo Geographical Indication, including the code of practice. Then to practice self-regulation, or at the same time promote, then develop markets. At the same time, technology development is critical also. We'll discuss that in relation to the code of practice. Next, please. So the content of the code of practice. So as I mentioned, this is already drafted. So we look at the history, the geographical location, variety, agricultural practices, post-harvest and handling, then labeling and consumer information. On history, the Davao Pomelo started with the promotion or propagation of the Magallanes variety. The Magallanes variety came from the agricultural technician who cultivated this actually it's a grafted pomelo grafted with I think with the calamansi as a rootstock. Then the scion is from pomelo. So with this, they were able to breed a variety that is seedless and reddish pink in color. Then it's sweet, etc. So that's why the farmers also like the quality of the final product in terms of appearance and in terms of taste. Then when we look at the geographical location, first it was limited to the Davao region. So we have, I think, around 4 provinces and 1 cities. But when we asked the question, what defines Davao Pomelo? Is it the political geographical boundaries, or is it about the soil? So when we probe the group, asking them on what's really the defining agronomic or agroclimatical conditions, they said that the Davao Pomelo is responding well to the volcanic soil. So that's attributable to the base of Mount Apo, which is very rich in terms of it's a very fertile land. So when we reviewed, they said if that's the case, then Mount Apo is extended to North and South Cotabato. Then, true enough, if we look at the traceability of the goods, Davao Pomelo is not really limited to Davao region only. In fact, a bigger volume comes from North and South Cotabato. The other famous brands are also coming from North and South Cotabato. So in this case, the group extended or redefined the geographical location to include Davao region and North and South Cotabato, but not the entire Soxargen region. Then on the variety, which is the center of the code of practice, they define why Magallanes variety. Then they trace the history of the multiplication of this Magallanes variety. Then agricultural practices, the most prominent characteristics, the practices of the farmers is they take care of Davao Pomelo from the days after the flower induction, they count from 6 to 7 months. So they follow certain practices from fertilizer application, um, for pest control, for the soil, basically the soil care, the plant care, and the fruit care. Then on post-harvest and handling, there's a unique practice. It's actually not unique. They do they to determine the quality of the Davao Pomelo. They float the fruits actually in water. Then the sinkers are classified as good quality. Then the floaters are the substandard quality. This is also done in coffee, wherein the specific density of product is determined with this specific density. Then, true enough, the specific density also translates to the sugar content of the Davao Pomelo. Like if it's a sinker, then the bricks, the sweetness of the Davao Pomelo is expected to go at least 10 bricks, or that's sweet already. Then on handling, actually they really put a lot of TLC in handling this Davao Pomelo. Then labeling and consumer information, this is where the group unites, wherein they said we can do individual farming, post-harvest, and marketing, but we can have a common labeling. So now, in terms of common labeling, they said we should change the spelling. We should change it to the Latin version, the Davao Pomelo, spelled as Pummelo. So they said that should be our name. So that's why it's called the Davao Pomelo with the Pummelo. Then they also agreed on the basic packaging, like where to put the logo. Is it on the 1 kilogram or per piece or 5 kilograms? So in this case, they agreed to put the label in the individual pomelo in 5 kilograms, in 13 kilograms, and 50 kilograms for bulk marketing. Next. So the development of the code of practice is really a hard work for all the stakeholders, but it doesn't stop there. The next question is how do we maintain that the users of our logo is following the code of practice? So they developed this internal control or quality management, which basically requires you to become a member first, then apply for the quality certification. So basically the same process on application, payment of certification fees. Then the group will assign one of their members to visit your field and do the verification whether you follow the code of practice. Then come up with a report. Then a committee within the Davao Pomelo Stakeholders Association will evaluate the report. Then once you are approved, then the producer or user will follow the terms on use of seal. Then the use of label is per piece, 5 kilograms, 13 kilograms, and 50 kilograms. Next. Then, of course, we need to recover. I mean, recover the cost. Though everything is done voluntarily, but it takes a lot of time and effort for everybody. Then to maintain that, the group has to sustain its activities or operation. So in this case, we facilitated the business modeling wherein how they identify what's the need of their members and the consumers, then how can they help? And with this help, how can they come up with services? Then with the services, they'll be able to help the members in terms of marketing, help the members in terms of recovering the cost. Then once the members recover the cost, then they can pay the group, the DPSA. So basically, they said From farming, post-harvest to marketing is the responsibility of the group. But the group will be responsible for the organization, the internal control, maintenance of the code of practice, and the promotion. So basically, we had that experience, and we don't know now what happened to the group, but they still are doing well in terms of promoting this Davao Pomelo. And next, please. So moving on to Guinmaras Mango. If you look at the logo, in 2014 they filed a registration with the IPOPHIL, but this time,
just to do it very quickly.
this time in 2014, it's not the group that registered it. It's actually the provincial government of Guimaras. But we found out that the registration is still pending, and we found out, I think, it's not the appropriate body to own the logo. Then in 2016 or 2017, they were able to finalize this logo and register it as a collective mark. But the preparation internally with the Guinmaras Mango group is using the GI approach. Next, please. So unlike with Davao Pomelo, the Davao Pomelo group, when we did the stakeholders consultation, are dominated with individual farmers, basically the members of the Guinmaras Mango Producers Development Cooperative. But the same approach, we identified who are the stakeholders, the primary and secondary. But we found out in Guinmaras Mango, it's very complicated. Like they have a set of input suppliers. We call them the suppliers of fertilizers, flower inducers, pesticides. Then another set is the service providers. So we have we call them the Spider-Men, the buggers. So because individually, the Guinmaras Mango, one of their secret is all the mangoes are wrapped in papers, in newspapers. So there's a big set of buggers, or we call them Spider-Men, because we saw them transferring from one branch to another, wrapping each mango. So it requires a big requirement, demand for labor. Then also the contractors or the sprayers. Okay. The other big stakeholder in the Guinmaras Mango are actually the politicians, like from the barangay chair to the mayor to the provincial and the Congress people. They support this Guinmaras Mango because it's their banner product. They donate a lot actually to the producers and put their names in the packaging or in the label of the Guinmaras Mango. So another important stakeholder in Guinmaras is the NMRDC, or we have the Mango Research Development Center. This actually is doing a good work in developing or protecting the Guinmaras Mango. Then another thing that we have found out is Guinmaras Mango is always on quarantine. So I think we have this. They're very protective. So like they have a mango quarantine year round. The national government came up with the memorandum already to lift the quarantine or the ban of mango coming into Guinmaras, but the stakeholders in Guinmaras are refusing or actually protesting this lifting of the ban, because they said we need to protect our Guinmaras mango from mango weevil coming from the different provinces. So if mango from other provinces are coming in, then there's a big suspicion that it will spread the insects, the mango weevil. Next. So on terms of organization, the Guimaras Mango was actually the Guimaras Mango Producers Development Cooperative. They are a big provincial federation. They have different members from different municipalities, and it is a secondary federation. But we found out why it was weakened. We thought it's just because of the competition. We found out that the big factor is when the agrarian reform was implemented in Guimaras, all the plantations were redistributed, and the exporters, the processors and the exporters pulled out. Like example, Dole, Ayala, these are the big exporters. They pulled out because of the redistribution of the land. So they're having problems consolidating the produce. Then another factor is the climate change. Before, they get something like straight 4 to 5 months of dry season. Now with climate change, they're getting rainfall, even distribution of rainfall. So they're having problems also because once there's not enough dry season, then the flowers, the mango flowers, will not continue to fruit. So this is one also factor why the Guimaras Mango slowed down. We found out also that the climate exchange, like the dry season, is now more in the northern part of Luzon. So if we heard stories like Zambales, Ilocos area, they're having bumper harvest of mango. They said that's really true because in Guimaras now we're getting rainfall most of the times, and our mango are not fruiting very well. Then
can we wrap up now?
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So again, we look at the mandate of the Guimaras Mango. So it shrunk from a federation to a basic organization. So they said our work is basically to distribute inputs. We have to monitor whether the farmers are following the production cycle. Like they don't harvest young mango, so they should harvest at least 115 days to 125 days. So plus minus 10 days from the 115. Then they ensure the sufficient supply of mango for the Mangaan Festival every May. So that's basically their mandate. So we expanded this to include the implementation of the code of practice, implement the internal control, and do the marketing. Next. So this is the content of the code of practice. So just to highlight, what's important in the code of practice is, unlike with Davao Pomelo, it relies on the volcanic soil. In Guimaras Mango, the soil is calcareous or rich in calcium. So you combine the loam soil, either sandy loam or gravelly loam, plus the calcareous, then you'll get a firmer mango. If you don't have that, then you can get a mango that is fibrous. Then another thing, that's the natural factors. On the human factors, they follow the practice of flower induction to wrapping to harvesting until 115 days. Then they measure also the bricks. Like the sweetness is double than the Davao Pomelo. If Davao Pomelo has bricks of 10, in Guimaras Mango, they measured from 18 to 22, so it's very sweet. Next. Then the same, we introduced to them the task of implementing quality management. So here, the role of the cooperative is very varied as compared to Davao Pomelo. So it includes both farming, post-harvest, then quality control, then marketing can be done individually or through consolidators. Next. the business modeling, with this, we were able to help them. The services that they continue is to subject the mango with hot water treatment to kill the anthracnose and other insects. Then the other one is the group said we want to do credit support to members to purchase inputs. Then they also serve as the marketing arm of the producers. Then also the quality management. So I think the Guinmaras Mango Group also got a support from the Department of Agriculture with the DA World Bank project, the Philippine Rural Development Project. So they were able to get a funding for its post-harvest facilities, its storage, the marketing, and the capital. Next. So if you look at the two, Davao Pomelo are, in a way, the producers are very independent because they are, most of them are companies. In Guinmaras Mango, these are individual farmers. In terms of organizational development, as I've mentioned, we expanded Davao Pomelo. In Guinmaras Mango, they shrunk from a federation to a basic cooperative. In terms of code of practice, we have the natural factors, like the definition for Davao Pomelo should be in the base of Mount Apo, then follow the cultural practices. In the case of Guinmaras Mango, it should be in the land where there is a combination of calcium-rich soil and loam soil. Then they follow the production practices. The internal control, they're basically the same. Then business modeling, marketing for Davao Pomelo is individual, but they put the label on each. Then marketing for Guinmaras Mango is on the collective level. Then finally, in my last slide, next please. Oops. Anyway, just to conclude, the geographical indication is really defines the uniqueness of the product, which we have actually. We express this in our heritage products, but actually we are having this comparative advantage. Like it's only unique because of our natural factors, because of our agroclimatic conditions. Plus, we have these cultural practices by our farmers or our processors. So we have this, and the market for GI is there, and all we have to do is tap the market at the same time. Ask support for government to protect our products. With this, I think I have to close, and thank you.
Shall I start now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm
Okay.
just looking for the PDF file.
Okay. While they're doing that, let me just say, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat sa Pilipinas, and good morning to our friends in Europe. So I want to talk about, okay, here it is. So let me just explain how I got involved in Lambanog. Well, we have a cultural heritage studies program in Ateneo. Every intersession, we have what we call the Ateneo Social and Cultural Laboratory. We open a field school for 3 weeks in a place outside Manila. And there, we document the local products. Because local products as well as local practices. Because we want the community to be interested in their heritage and to make use of their heritage in development. Okay, in the case of Lambanog, 2009, I was there for 3 weeks at Tayabas with my students. And although I had known Lambanog since adolescence, I discovered wonderful qualities about Lambanog. And I discovered its story. So, meanwhile, I'd also discovered Tayabas. So, the combination of Lambanog and Tayabas has never left me. So, I'd like to share the story of Lambanog and Tayabas with you. Next, please. The challenge right now is that our planet is heating up. Okay. At the same time, poverty is high in the Philippines, particularly in the farm sector.
particularly in the coconut sector. So how do you meet these challenges? Next, please. Okay, the problem with capitalism is it goes where the labor costs are lower. And capitalism has seized upon globalization to just bring its capital wherever the labor costs are low. That can put farmers at a disadvantage. Okay, because if you're a capitalist, you will just invest where labor costs are cheaper. So fortunately, the French and the Europeans have developed this system that they call terroir to be protected by GI. What Okay, terroir is a French word which I'd like to translate into kapuukan. In other words, isang pook na natatangi dahil may mga katangian na naiiba. You cannot find it elsewhere. Okay, the concept of terroir means that products are protected by geographical indications because these products are found only in a particular spot on our globe. Okay, and because of this, they can demand a premium. Now, notice that the concept of terroir actually protects biodiversity, which is so important because the problem with globalization is it wipes out even global diversity by biodiversity because it just invests in plantations where the labor costs are cheaper. So it doesn't really care about the diversity in the world, and that is very dangerous for the environment. So what is terroir? It's the product of a specific natural environment and cultural practices in making a product. What do you mean by specific natural environment? We mean by topography, the lay of the land, the soil, the climate, and the water flow. And cultural practices because some places have their own way of making a product, which is not found elsewhere. So terroir responds to both protect the environment at the same time responds to protecting local culture. Next, please. Lambanog has finally gotten the attention of Filipino entrepreneurs. Now, you can buy lambanog for 500 pesos in Tayabas. Now, however, recently, over the past 10 years, an entrepreneur has tried to elevate the quality of lambanog. Instead of distilling it just twice, he has distilled it 6 times. I forget the owner of Lakan Lambanog, but it's very good lambanog. It's very expensive too. And because of the 6 times distillation is very strong, but it has floral notes. What I'm happy about it is that it has shown that lambanog, which many people look down upon as baduy, actually can be very high quality. In fact, his product has garnered gold medals abroad. For example, recently in a competition in Portugal, international competition for alcoholic drinks. Next, please. So let's go into lambanog and its story. The story of lambanog is tied in with its specific environment. Tayabas spreads on the shoulder of Mount Banahaw. Mount Banahaw is a volcano sacred to southern Tagalogs. In fact, there are shrines on the shoulder of Mount Banahaw that can be visited by pilgrims. The shrines are a piece of rock, a waterfall, a dried lava tube, a cave. The shrines are scattered from the base of the volcano up to the tip. Now it's interesting that of course, being a volcano, it has springs that gush out from its sides. Trekking with friends once through Banahaw, I was impressed by how clear the waters are that were gushing from the sides of Banahaw, which eventually become streams and rivers. Now, this could actually be emphasized in marketing the terroir of Banahaw, but so far it is not emphasized, unfortunately. Nor likewise the fact that the soil used for coconuts in Tayabas is actually volcanic soil. Okay, next please. Not emphasized enough is that lambanog, the making of lambanog, and the making of tuba for that matter, is a very dangerous task because when you climb up the coconut tree, you can fall off. And what's also scary is that to make things easier, at least, so they say, for the tuba gatherer, the tuba gatherers, there are actually bridges that connect one coconut tree to the other. But you can imagine, as people do fall and maim themselves or even die. So this is something to consider when we talk about the price of lambanog. Next. Next, please. So what is it that's extracted? Actually, what's extracted is the sap of the coconut flower, which has to be collected every day. Very slowly, you bend the coconut flower until the sap flows into a container. That has to be done every day. It's not a one-time task. Okay, so people have to climb every day. Next, please. So first of all, they make tuba wine. No? So the sap is extracted and it's fermented into tuba wine. So tuba wine is only the first stage. Okay. Then the tuba wine is distilled to make the liquor called lambanog. So here's a distillery in Tayabas. Okay, the vapors are collected from the burning of the tuba. They're collected, and that is what is known as lambanog. So of course, the more you distill, the stronger the alcohol content. Next, please. The Philippines has exerted a lot of influence on Mexico and other Spanish American countries. One of the things we exported is actually tuba making. It was brought over by Filipino migrants during the galleon trade, 1600s. Mexicans call it tuba, we call it tuba. It's actually more popular in Mexico than here because we tend to look at tuba as low class. In Mexico, for example, in the West Coast, like Colima, it's drunk regularly by people almost every day. They mix it with fruits and nuts. Okay, next. In fact, there's a uniform. You can see that man is in white with a red sash. Next, please. Filipinos also brought lambanog making to Mexico, where it was called vino de coco. It's a misnomer because it's really not just wine. It's wine that's distilled and transformed into liquor. So in the 17th century in Mexico, it was called vino de coco. Now, how was it distilled? It was distilled into a liquor using what Mexicans called destillador Filipino. In other words, it's a tree trunk hollowed out with a metal still on top. So, and in Mexican, I've seen Mexican museums examples of the destillador Filipino. Apparently, there was no distillation in Mexico before the colonial period. In the indigenous period, they didn't know how to make liquor. So let me just translate the passage here. Here we see a destillador Filipino, being used to make mezcal. So that is one of our contributions to Mexico. Next, please. So in the 1730s, 1740s, the making of vino de coco or coconut liquor was banned by the Spanish crown because it wanted to protect liquors coming from the peninsula. It was very popular because people thought it wasn't just a good drink, it was also good for the body. It's medicinal. However, liquor from the agave cactus was not banned. So mezcal eventually became tequila. So the question is, what distillery did it use? Apparently, it made use of the Destillador Filipino. So that's the connection it has with Lambanog. It's not that Lambanog led directly to tequila, no. It's just that distillation process was inspired by the Filipino Destillador. Next, please. So I'm sharing with you a video film that was sent to me just over the weekend by a Mexican friend who spent 2 intercessions with us in Bohol and Aklan, 2013 and 2014, I believe. It's about how tuba is made in Mexico and the Philippines. Okay, so the history is there, the process is there, and it has a lot of interviews with both Mexicans and Filipinos. Although it is in Spanish, of course, there are English subtitles, so it's very easy to follow. Next, please. Meanwhile, I'd like to share with you a short video on how Tagayan is actually done. It's a very charming ritual.
Kumpara sa Maynila na may kaguluhan at minsan may suntukan pa, ang Tagayan sa Quezon ay payapa at simbolo ng pakikisama. Sa ating video ngayon, ating pag-usapan ang ritual ng Tagayan ng mga taga-Quezon. Ngunit bago ito, make sure to click the subscribe button para makita ninyo ang iba pang video kagaya nito. Ang pagtagay ay isang kultural na gawain sa mga bayang malapit sa Mount Banahaw. Ito ang Lukban, Tayabas at Sariaya. Ang ritual na ito ay umiikot sa pag-iinom ng lambanog, isang uri ng alak na mula sa coconut nectar. Saan nga ba nagmula ang salitang Tagayan? Ito ay nag-ugat sa salitang tagay o nangangahulugang pag-iinom ng alak mula sa isang baso na nagmula sa isang bote na pinagsasaluhan ng lahat ng kasali sa umpukan. Sisimula ang Tagayan sa pagtatanong ng may-ari ng bahay o ng host sa mga bisita na, "Nagsapi na ba kayo?" Ang katanungang ito ay upang masigurado kung kumain na ba ang lahat ng kasali sa Tagayan. Kadalasan, naglalabas din ang may-ari ng bahay o ang host ng mga finger foods o pulutan bilang karagdagang pansapin sa tiyan ng mga mag-iinom. Ang tanggero ang may pinakamalaking responsibilidad sa inuman. Siya ang magbibigay ng mga inumin sa bawat kalahok, nagpapanatili ng ikot ng tagay, at kokontrol sa dami ng lipos o rounds ng inuman. Ang malaking bote na kinalalagyan ng lambanog ay tinatawag na damahuana. Gayunpaman, hindi ito inilalagay sa ibabaw ng lamesa bilang tanda ng paggalang sa lahat ng mag-iinom. Dahil dito, kinakailangan munang isalin ng tanggero sa mas maliit na lalagyan ang lambanog. Ang mas maliit na bote kung saan inilipat ang lambanog ang magdedetermine kung gaano kahaba ang isang lipos. Kung ating ikukumpara sa boxing, ang Tagayan ay binubuo ng mga lipos o iba't ibang mga rounds. Kapag naubos na ang laman nito, nangangahulugang tapos na rin ang lipos. Kung nais pa ng mga kalahok, maaari muling magsalin ang tanggero at magsisimula na ulit ang panibagong lipos. Ang pinakaunang tagay ay iniinom ng tanggero. Bago uminom, sinasabi niya ang katagang, "Naay po," na siya namang sasagutin ng mga kasama niya ng, "Pakinabangan po." Makalipas tumagay ng tanggero, iikot na ang tagay ng pakanan o pakaliwa depende sa napagkasunduan. Sa pagkakataong may kasama sa tagayan na hindi kayang uminom o hindi na maaaring uminom, maaari niyang sabihin ang katagang, "Titimtiman ko lamang ito." Kanya lamang padadampian ang kanyang labi ng lambanog, ngunit hindi niya ito iinumin. Dahil dito, kinakailangang may sumalo sa tagay na ito dahil kung wala, ang tanggero uli ang iinom nito. Ang sino mong sasalo sa tagay ay magsasabi ng katagang, "Sasakupin na po kita." Iinumin ng taong ito ang tagay ng kanyang sinakop maging ang kanyang orihinal na tagay. Sa mga sasakop ng tagay, tandaan na madodoble ang bilang ng iyong iinumin. Kaya, hinay-hinay lamang. Ang mga social gathering kagaya ng Tagayan ay nagiging daan din ng mga binatang taga-Quezon upang dumiskarte sa kadalagahan. Sa pagkakataong may dalagang walang nobyo ang nagsabing, titintiman niya lamang ang kanyang tagay, nagiging pagkakataon ito ng mga binatang single na magpakitang gilas sa pamamagitan ng pagsakop sa tagay ng dalaga. Bilang dagdag sa kasiyahan, hinahanap ng binata ang eksaktong bahagi ng baso kung saan lumapat ang labi ng dalaga. At dito din niya ilalapat ang kanyang labi habang umiinom ng tagay. Makalipas tumagay, kadalasang sinasabi ang birong, "Ay, napakatamis naman ng tagay ninyo." Hindi kumpletong tagayan kung walang tugtugin mula sa radyo o gitara. Dahil dito, hindi minsan mapigilan ng mga nagiinom na papaindak sa saliw ng tugtugin. Kung kaya, huwag magtaka kung makakita ka ng mga taong nagsasayawan tuwing may tagayan. Para sa mga bibisita sa Quezon, hindi magiging buo ang iyong karanasan kung hindi mo masusubok tumagay kasama ang mga taga rito. Ika nga, mainit man ang hagod ng lambanog, mas mainit pa din ng dihamak ang paikisama ng mga taga Quezon. Kaya tara na sa lalawigan ng Quezon. Naghihintay na ang tagay mo.
Okay. Sige, let's continue. Back to Tayabas.
Mrs. Stella, the PowerPoint, please.
Okay, now, I was also entranced by Tayabas because of its architectural landscape. It's really one of the places in the Philippines that has such a varied and at the same time magnificent architectural landscape. Can we just go back to architectural landscape, please? Okay, you see, during the Spanish period, while all the towns were called pueblo, there were only 7 places called villa. These villa were recognized cities. Tayabas was the capital of the entire province we now call Quezon, but formerly the entire province was called Tayabas. So it has this grand church, probably one of the largest in the country, very long nave with 5 well-preserved altars, as you can see. At the same time, Tayabas used to be a fortress town sitting on a mountainside, protected from the sea by a series of ravines, because at the time the coastal areas were ravaged by pirates almost every year. So it was protected by ravines. Now, when piracy ended in the 1840s, the people decided to connect their city to the coast by constructing bridges. The most spectacular is Malagang Long Bridge, which is actually in their logo, which is actually in the logo of that video I just showed you right now. So let's go to the next. Now, there's obviously need to have a group that can form the core of support for advancing the cause of Lambanog. Fortunately, there is such a group. It's called Atagan. It's composed of writers, scholars, and NGO workers. The driving soul of that for me is Dr. Ryan Palad, who every 2 years or so organizes a conference on the history and heritage of the Southern Tagalog region. So I think they could form the core of any such endeavor to protect and promote Lambanog. The group is called Atagan because Atagan, I believe, is a Tayabas Tagalog word for bayanihan. So let's go to the next and the final slide. So magtagay tayo. Salamat po.
You're on mute po.
Let's go back to the PowerPoint so that we can make the conclusions. Can you see this? I have to share.
Share, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now we'd like to conclude. At this presentation, I just want to point out that I highlighted Cordillera Heirloom Rice because it is one of those GI products that will have a very important context in terms of the vernacular and cultural environment, in cultural landscape. It is actually the site of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and we have to take that into context in terms of identifying the uniqueness of this GI product. The same way that Dr. Zialcita has just pointed out to us all these other architectural and cultural rituals that are part of the tagayan and drinking of the product. So this is the kind of context that I'm talking about. And we have here the spaces, the houses. And this is the impact when people do not subscribe to the traditional forms of building anymore. And what happens when people begin to understand that growing the heirloom rice is not just about the rice itself, but actually everything else that is tied to the culture. And I'd like to show here a slide that was taken from the very first webinar that was hosted, which was jointly with ICOMOS, that shows an image from my colleague, Tracy Santiago. And it shows the houses that are being re-roofed again with traditional materials. On the right side and on the left, the GI sheets. Right, so in conclusion, I would like to take a few minutes to show you the 3 points that we have tried to show you today. I provided an overview, theoretically and in terms of the practice, and I tried to show the gaps in the field. So agriculture is slightly different from the cultural goods like the textile, but it's both rooted in growing. Okay, agriculture. The gaps in the field for cultural goods and agricultural goods are slightly different, but they both need some form of cultural mapping at this point in time, which we don't see yet. For the primary speakers, we had Peter Damry talking about textiles in last week, and this week we had Patrick looking at agricultural goods, and Peter presented the overview from the point of view of Europe and ASEAN through the example of Tinalak. Today we have Patrick looking at the 2 case studies for Guinmaras Mango and Davao Pomelo, and he showed us the historical applications from 2013 to 2017, and he showed us the examples for the primary and secondary stakeholders and the support network that we need. And finally, the respondents. Last week, we had Cherise Tagaret showing us textiles and the production and the consumption of textiles. And today, we had Dr. Zialcita showing us lambanog as our heritage and the implication of the architectural landscape in this kind of GI product. How is the landscape useful? So with that, I think, John, we open the floor for question and answer.
Yes. We're now going to go to the question and answer portion of this episode. So I'm going to represent our viewers and our attendees. So for the first question, we have from Ige Ramos, who is joining us today via Zoom. So his question is it possible to register local vinegar as GI based on terroir and basic ingredients like coconut, kaong, sugarcane, pineapple, cashew, and banana. What are the steps to be able to secure a GI or DOP similar to the Italians on how they market balsamic vinegar of Modena? Thank you.
Patrick, I think you probably
That's
have.
Patrick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you are just going to name it with the commodity, let's say coconut vinegar, then that doesn't qualify, even with the collective mark. So it has to be partly rooted with the location. A good word introduced by Dr. Zialcita is the kapuokan or the terroir. So if you have like kaong, or you have coconut vinegar, it must have the reputation from coming from that place and the attributable quality from that place. Like I think that can also be related to the Tayabas Lambanog. Um, Before making it into wine, liquor or lambanog, um, I think the case of Tayabas Lamanol, as explained by Dr. Salsita, there's a strong link with the terroir, and the quality is very attributable to the place. So if you have a semblance, if your product has a semblance of that, then the next thing is you should start documenting, and also basically the documentation must be coming from the actual practices that are usually handed down from generations. So you can start with that. We can start with that.
Okay, let me just say something. By coincidence, the fellow who asked that is Ige Ramos. He heads the culinary historians of the Philippines. He's been a prolific author on culinary heritage, and the term kapuokan was actually developed by him and me conversation. In fact, it appears in his book. Sigura, this is
Yeah.
Ige Ramos can claim credit for the term kapuokan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ike.
Thank you. I hope that answers these questions.
Thank you so much. We shall now proceed to the second one. So this one is from Edwin Galvez from Zoom. Some of the products that are up for possible GI protection are products from our indigenous cultural communities or indigenous peoples. How will the GI protection ensure that only the recognition of their agricultural heritage, but also the benefit? Sorry, wait. How will GI protection ensure that uh, their products are not only recognized, but the community also benefit economically, specifically when these produce come from their ancestral domains?
Patrick, would you like to open first?
Yes.
I think
Exactly. This is the intention of GI. Remember, I mentioned the word comparative advantage. So meaning the place can only give the uniqueness of the product. So meaning if it's unique to the place, then the benefit should primarily go back to the players in that area. The cases of geographical indications in Europe are meant to protect and give benefits back to the communities who develop the reputation, who develop the products, and who should commercialize. That's the intention of the GI, and as we've known already, we don't have that yet. We only have the collective mark. Yes, Estela, would you like to add?
Yeah. I just want to add a little bit to that. Last week we dealt with textiles, and it's basically the same principle. It's the idea that you begin to use the sign as the signal for the link to the community. And so, for example, my example then was, for example, Roquefort cheese. So when I buy that cheese, there will be a certain number of makers coming from that region who produce. They're the only ones who can use that name. That is the idea here, that connection with the GI, the geographic location, is unique. So we cannot separate that connection between land with the product, and this is why it has to be known and respected throughout the whole world. That's the point. I think that answers the question, John.
Yeah.
Sir, unless you want to add anything, Dr. Zialcita?
I just wanted to say something. Coconut liquor is actually made in other parts of the world. It's called arak in South Asia. So we have to protect the name lambanog, so that in case lambanog becomes popular, no other place in the world can use the word lambanog.
Yes.
Yeah.
John?
Can I add on what Estela said on the example of indigenous product, like the one in Tinalak? They call the product Tinalak Tao Subu. It means Tinalak from the people of Lake Cebu. So that's a conscious decision from the group when we facilitated it. Instead of just calling it Tinalak, the group decided that it should be from the people of Lake Cebu and not the generic Tinalak, which the Tiboli group is also doing in general. So with that, they narrowed down. And in terms of natural resources, they said raw material should only come from Lake Cebu. Then the skills on backstrap loom weaving should be done in Lake Cebu. Marketing could be done outside, but the raw materials, the skill should be from Lake Cebu, and the quality management should be done by the group. So I think on the question of Edwin Galvez, the Tinalak is a very strong case of protecting the heritage products of the indigenous peoples. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Our next question is from Zoom. Is there a framework model or protocol that is universally accepted already for GIs?
No. Go.
Yeah, there are. Different countries have their own, and as much as possible, each country is encouraged to come up with their own. They call it book registry or registry of GIs, etc. We also have our own draft, but again, we don't call it GI. We call it a collective mark. So it's like a step in preparation for GI.
On the other hand, let me just point, it's from your discussion, it seems that GIs are recognized by the European Union but not recognized by the United States.
Yes.
Yes, so you cannot speak of universal. Universal within those countries that follow the European model, but not universally recognized in the US, because the US keeps insisting on free trade.
Mm-hmm.
Let capital flow where it will.
Mrs. Teller, you're on mute.
I just want to add a complication with the situation of the United States. Although it does not recognize GI, there are certain countries, not countries, but certain geographic locations with products that are allowed to protect their goods. So, for example, I think it's Tennessee whiskey, for example, is one of those. So there is this disavowal at the state level, at the national level, but at the federal level with the individual states, they could and have argued that they could protect themselves. So, John?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you so much for that. So our next question is from Facebook. So this one is from Gabriel Caballero. So how much of the Philippine techniques of making tuba has remained the same in Mexico?
Well, I hope you watched the video. it contrasts how Filipinos like their tuba and how Mexicans like their tuba. Mexicans like their tuba fresh, sweet, and they mix fruits, in fact, with it. Strawberries, oranges, and nuts. Whereas Filipinos like their tuba a little sour. In fact, they add a bark, I think it's called tungog, which gives it a certain different flavor. So iba. But Mexicans recognize that their making of tuba came from the Philippines via the galleon trade.
May I ask Patrick something about this in relation to Gabrielle's question? Is it possible then that if in theory we are able to protect tuba itself, the word, can no longer be used by anybody else?
Yes, if we just register, even with a trademark or with a collective trademark, then more or less we qualify it as our first. We are the first registrant. So I mean, our CM system is based on that. Who's the pioneer? Who's the first registrant? Then, though it's not enough protection, but at least you are in the advantage already.
Okay, except in the case of tuba, I hope you don't think of protecting the name because you cannot export tuba. It has to be drunk quickly. It's the liquor that we have to protect. The name, lambanog has to be protected because that can be exported.
Yeah.
In the same way, by the way, I noticed Filipinos are making tequila and they call it tequila. They're not respecting tequila as a brand name. I was shocked.
Yeah, in fact, the tuba, there's this bahalina. So it's not really the fresh ones. I think in Leyte, they're coming up strong with the bahalina. And
exactly.
But I don't know if it's applied already with the traditional trademark. I haven't seen any collective mark, neither on the bahalina. So, in fact, in terms of packaging, they were able to come up with bottled bahalina, and they export this to some countries already.
That they can export because tuba as such cannot be kept for too long.
Yeah, because it's fresh.
Yeah.
It's not the bahalina type.
Yeah.
John?
Next question. Is the size of the market a consideration in the acquisition of GI?
Well, Patrick, do you want to go first, and then I will add a little bit in terms of European market.
Yeah, the mere fact that there's already a reputation, meaning there is a market, then that reputation should be enjoyed economically by the producers. So in terms of sizing up the market, then that should be the quantification. If you bring a product that has reputation to another market, then you are in the market development stage. You have a good product, but you don't have a market yet outside of your, let's say, domestic market. Then that's something you have to tap the GI market so that it can be accessible to the new customers or consumers. Yes, Estela.
Right. So I think that the question of the market is a more complex one in the sense that, yes, of course, you need the buyers to be there, especially in those areas where the GI is recognized. So, for example, the example that I know best is, of course, cacao. And there is a market for fine cocoa. But in terms of history, that is also important. So one of the things that we want recognized is the fact that actually after the galleon trade, the Philippines was the first point of arrival in Asia Pacific. So once you recognize the GI there, that is part and parcel of the whole package. So not only do you make known that you have this product and the market will respect that, but you also have that reputation recognized. Yeah, I think that's John. Next one.
Right, next one. This one is from Facebook, from Chris Uson. So earlier you mentioned about Davao Pomelo. His question is, where do you stand on the process of Davao cacao? And if I may add, how about Davao durian?
So just to say now that we will deal with the issue of cacao on a whole session. We will not discuss it at all at this point in terms of specifics. But the other one was durian.
Yes, durian.
Patrick, is it possible?
You are on mute po.
The reputation of durian is there. Specifically, it's associated or affiliated with Davao durian. But again, the same story with Davao Pomelo. But this one is larger. The source is coming from different regions. Like example, Bukidnon is already producing durian. Soxargen and the other nearby provinces surrounding Davao are also producing durian. Then the reputation is that there's Durian Festival, there's Kadayawan Festival. It's basically a harvest festival, and the Davao Durian reputation is built on being Davao as a market. So it's like it is where the produce are going, and people are celebrating because the market is here in Davao. In terms of looking at the specifics, what's with the natural factors, what's with the agroclimatic conditions in growing durian, and the practices of the farmers, that's something we haven't looked into yet.
Yeah.
But the reputation is there. Then we
Well,
need to do more. Yeah.
Patrick,
Yes,
but you'll have to show that the durian produced in Davao has a very different flavor from the one produced in Indonesia or Malaysia or Thailand, because it's popular in Southeast Asia. It's grown all over.
Mm.
That is where terroir comes in. Paano naiiba yung lasa at yung bango.
Yeah.
Bango.
Yeah, I think that's another consideration because some of the varieties we have introduced in here in Mindanao or in the Philippines are also coming from Malaysia and Thailand. In fact, these two countries are arguing that they have the best durian. Of course, Malaysia said they have the best, and in Davao I also see some retailers promoting their durian is using the Malaysian variety or the Thai varieties. Yeah, it has to be surfaced at different levels, at the provincial level, at the regional level, and even at the ASEAN level.
John?
From Zoom as well. So what are the next steps to proceed with GI from the collective mark? And who is primarily responsible for this?
Yeah. Big question, Patrick.
Big question. So it's like at the moment, we have the rules and regulation of registering GI as a collective mark. So that's something we can work on. In terms of proceeding, that guidelines is already is very clear. Like when a group wants to register a collective mark, it has to submit certain documents or certain proof that they can qualify as a collective mark. With that, I think we can do with it. Then second level is at the policy level. So as I've mentioned, we need to do a policy development that is equivalent or parallel to the European Sui Generis system. That is something we have to work on with our legislators, our government agencies, etc. Yes, Estela, would you like to add?
Yeah, so actually one of the key points that need to be made is that we as a people have to say that we want it. And by people, I mean those producers, those artisans that have the products that they want to protect. And if we are satisfied with the collective mark, then we don't have to do anything. But I think that that's not the case. And certainly it's not the case in some areas like very high priced commodities. So the conversation will obviously continue. John?
Our next question is from Facebook. How can the ordinary person contribute towards this cause?
Right. The question here is agency at the individual level. I can say something, but also I think maybe Dr. Zialcita might have some comments. I think that if we put it as an individual, what can you do about it? Obviously, one way that you could help the grower or the artisan is to be willingly paying the price, the premium for their product.
Tama.
And it depends also on who this person is. Are you simply a consumer, or are you actually part of the supply chain? Are you a designer? Are you a storeholder? So there are different answers to that depending on what your life situation is. But simply as a buyer, I think that we have to be willing to pay that premium for the artisan or the grower.
Correct.
Yeah.
The problem is really the buyer. Is the buyer willing to pay a premium? Because kung nagtitipid, hindi. So, in the case, for example, of Ilocano Basi for me is more flavorsome when it's aged. But I was told by Basi producers in San Ildefonso, in Ilocos Sur, that people want to buy the Basi immediately. So they sell immediately. They don't age anymore. Sayang. Because when it's aged, it's like port wine, I was told by Jean Gonzalez of Cafe Isabel.
Yeah. Actually, I think that the market will dictate the differentiation, Dr. Zialcita, in the future. Because right now, if I look at, okay, you can't eat cacao. Normally, you can't eat cacao as a seed or as a raw product. People will turn it into chocolate. And the market now is so differentiated. Some people will sell the chocolate soon after it's molded. But some people also age it for 3 months. Some people will keep it in the cool storage for 6 months before they sell it. And so depending on what the market situation is, I think that eventually it will start to change itself. John?
Thank you so much. Our next one is from Zoom. How much on average is the cost of acquiring GI, and where does the funding usually come from?
Patrick.
What's that again, John? Sorry.
Sorry. The question is, how much is on average is the cost of acquiring GI, and where does the funds usually come from?
The cost is it's a social infrastructure investment actually. Like the process that I have discussed has a cost, like improving the organization, strengthening the organization. There's an organizing cost. It's a social organizing cost, and that's one. The other one is the introduction of code of practice development, documenting the practices, the methods. There's an investment also on basically the documentation, because in our case, these are heritage and usually handed down practices. There's no document. Like in the case of Lake Cebu Tinalak, they have this tradition handed down from generations to generations. Then when we documented, they started from the Tiboli language. Then we asked them to translate it in English. Then from there, we were able to capture the practices, the verbal tradition. That one has a cost also. Then the other one is the quality management. This is the main difference of, let's say, a common commodity. in this case, we want to define, we want to protect, we want to maintain the quality by implementing the tradition, and it has to be documented also. So that one, there's a cost also. And at the moment, the market don't see those costs. And if they are if they're given, let's say, different tinalak from Davao, tinalak from Lake Cebu, etc., they don't see the cost involved in following those traditions. So they only see the differences in price. Sometimes they don't see the real GI product. Like I think in last week's presentation, now there are tinalak that are not really the traditional ones, sold very cheap as compared to the process of making tinala. Like in the export now per meter is something like 600 to 1,000 per meter, but the cost of production is something like 2,000 per meter in Lake Cebu. So when we look at even the marketing point of view, the dominant players in the tinalak are not really getting their tinalak from the traditional ones. No? So that one, if we are to compensate the community, the producers, and their tradition, then the consumers have to be educated on, to be prepared on those information that are being done in preparing the product. So in a way, in Europe, the price of GI products are normally doubled or three times, tripled, because of because they keep following the tradition. They also capture the tradition in documents, in quality management, etc. So those are the hidden costs that are not usually showed in a free trade system. Like competition is just based on price and aesthetic or physical appearance, etc.
Okay, may I just add something to that? The beautiful thing kasi about GI and terroir is you're actually paying your respect to the story of a particular community. Hindi mo siya binababoy by insisting on a low-cost price. You're paying respect to centuries of tradition. Tapos, at the same time, you're willing to contribute to that community.
Yes, I agree. I just want to add as well that the cost will probably depend on just how organized the communities are. And so, for example, if there is not even any system of traceability within the group of farmers or co-ops that are pooling together their resources, then there will be a lot more cost in terms of creating that infrastructure. Whereas if it's already organized, then you can just not spend there, but then you have the costs for the consultants. Yeah. So, John, next one.
Actually, we are running out of time,
we have to wrap up now.
But we can ask one more question.
Okay, last question.
Yeah. So this one is from Philip Medina. So the question is, how will industries active in the process of GI be protected from capitalists when international corporate marketing can also use the principles of exclusive provenance and artisanal vibe to a product? Should there be a government agency actively promoting the principles and processes of GI in the Philippines?
Yeah.
Do you want to say something, Patrick?
Before at the moment, we have regulators. And example, IPOPHIL is basically a regulatory agency. And if they add mandate on promoting GI in the community, they're basically getting engaged in doing capacity building or organizing producers groups, which is beyond their mandate. So they're also in a dilemma wherein they want to perform their regulatory work, but at the same time they're not mandated, they're not equipped to handle the organizing, capacity building, and they have to work with other agencies. So I think that's the key. we need to identify and we need to do more collaboration with other agencies. Like example, if GI is more on agriculture based, if our policy will define later on that our GI is basically agriculture based, then we have to work more with the Department of Agriculture. Then on the quality management and the marketing side, then we have to bring in the agencies within DTI. Then on technology, we should bring in also DOST, etc. So I think the key is collaboration with the different agencies and identify one champion in terms of promoting GI in the Philippines.
I just want to add a little bit to that. In terms of policing at the individual level, I think there has to be a lot of education on the part of the consumer. So, for example, if we take at the example of coffee, right? Everybody drinks instant coffee, and that is a bulk commodity. But specialty coffee is very clearly different from bulk coffee. But within that specialty trade, you also have the big suppliers and you have the artisanal suppliers. And so you have, for example, Seattle's Best Coffee or even Starbucks, which have the single origin branding, but obviously they are dealing with metric tons of produce, of commodities. And then we have the very small players who are exporting, by 500 kilograms, for example. And so the question is, we have to educate the market as well. It can be policed, at the supranational body, but in terms of the paying consumer, are you paying that premium and is it going to the right supplier or grower? That's something that you have to ask yourself. Yeah. I think, John, that's the last bit.
Yes, for now, because we are running out of time. So, would you like to say something?
I just want to show the credits, maybe. Is that possible?
Sure.
Yeah. I think this is very important, and so I want to. Right. So I would just like to finish by thanking everybody, the Intramuros administration, for hosting us for 2 weeks now. Actually, third week, including webinar 1 on food security. I'd like to thank Patrick Belisario, and you can contact him at this email address. And of course, Dr. Zialcita for showing us about so much about lambanog. And oops. That's it.
Yeah. So thank you, dear speakers. But before we end, there were still a lot of questions that were not raised on air. But for those who are genuinely interested, you can contact any of our speakers. The email addresses are flashed on the screen. Feel free to screen grab the screen so that you have their contact details. So they are available if you have any questions. If you would like to ask for the PowerPoint, you can directly ask from the speaker. No need to ask from IA. So feel free to do so. Now, feel free as well to follow us in social media. We are in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And for those who are late or who missed this episode, do not worry because this episode will be uploaded later in our YouTube channel. So we are in YouTube, just key in Intramuros Administration. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And let me take this opportunity as well to promote our other site, the Google Arts and Culture profile of the Intramuros Administration. Just key in Intramuros Administration to view our museum collection, our digitized museum collection. So if you missed going to our museums in Intramuros, don't worry because you can now view many of our collections in Google Arts and Culture. And also, let me promote our succeeding talk. So this one about GI is our 22nd. So this one by Nathaniel von Einsiedel, sorry. Nathaniel von Einsiedel. This one is the 23rd. So this is tomorrow. So August 8, 3 p.m. The topic is 1905 Burnham Plan for Manila and the 1941 Frost Arellano Plan for Quezon City. So he's going to compare the two development plans, the Burnham Plan and the Frost Arellano Plan of Quezon City, and he will explore what worked, what did not, and why. So stay tuned for the webinar for tomorrow, August 8th. Then next week, Friday, August 14, we have, this one is our 24th episode. So we have a talk by Nina Inyon, Leoncio Asuncion Iconology in the 19th Century Philippine Colonial Religious Sculpture, an analysis. And the following day, on Saturday next week, August 15, we will have Dr. Karine Santillan, who will discuss the architecture of Intramuros. Her title is Looking at Layers, a reassessment of built heritage in Intramuros. So, so far, that's what we have on our slate. And don't forget to like us and follow us in our social media channels to stay updated in our future ILS episodes. Now, before I say goodbye to everyone, Mrs. Estela or the other speakers, Mr. Patrick or Dr. Zialcita, would you like to say some final words, perhaps?
Patrick, Dr. Zialcita? Nothing left?
Well, I just want to share the fact that, again, this notion of kapookan is actually an attempt to realize that not everything on our planet can be reduced to one homogeneous mass. The different places have different stories. Different places have different geographical and ecological qualities. And I think we should respect this.
And with that, I also want to say that this is not the end of the conversation. We will continue with it in September, right, John?
Yes, on September.
And please watch out for the further announcements because we could be changing slightly the format, possibly. And hopefully as well, we will have a bigger audience because I would like to acknowledge our kababayan overseas. The international community is very important in this conversation, and especially our kababayan in Hong Kong, the farming community there who have made their presence known. They have to be part of the conversation as well. So watch out for the next stage.
Yes, for September. Yes.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it. So that's it for now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, dear speakers, and thank you to our attendees for joining us in our 22nd. See you in our 23rd, 24th, 25th, and so on. So we still have a lot this month and beyond. Thank you so much, everyone, and good evening.
Thank you and good evening.